Long ago, the world was a very traditional place. People lived simple lives and followed the old rules of the past. In 15th century Italy, men and women usually did the exact same jobs their parents did. They accepted the world exactly as it was. Few people asked big questions about nature or science. But in the middle of this quiet history, everything was about to change. A new kind of light was breaking through the darkness of the past. This change needed a special kind of person. It needed someone who did not just accept the normal rules. It required a man who looked at ordinary things and saw magic. This is the story of Leonardo da Vinci. He is famous as a painter, but his true genius was his deep, endless curiosity. Most people walk through a forest and only see trees. Leonardo was completely different. When he looked at a small bird in the sky, he did not just see an animal. He saw a perfect flying machine. When he looked at a simple flower, he saw a complex mathematical design. His eyes worked differently than anyone else's. He watched the world with intense, total focus. He was not satisfied with just one skill. In those days, a person was a builder, a soldier, or an artist. Leonardo wanted to be all of them. He had a strong desire to know absolutely everything about the universe. He wanted to understand how water moved in a river and how the stars traveled in the night sky. His mind was always hungry for new answers. We often call this period in history the Renaissance. It is a French word that means rebirth. But you can simply think of it as a time of waking up. Europe was waking up from a long, sleepy period. People started to read, explore, and invent again. And right at the center of this great awakening was the brilliant, restless mind of Leonardo da Vinci. Before we go deeper into his incredible mind, take a quick moment to tell us in the comments below. Where are you listening from today? It is always amazing to see people from all over the world connecting through history. If you enjoy these deep stories, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue. Now, let us return to the beginning of Leonardo's journey. To understand the man, we must first look at the boy. His brilliant mind did not begin in a great university or a rich palace. It started in the quiet, green hills of the Italian countryside. The early years of his life shaped everything he would later become. It was a humble beginning, far away from the busy cities and powerful kings he would eventually know. In the year 1452, a baby was born in a very small village. The name of the village was Vinci. It was surrounded by olive trees, rivers, and wild nature. Because he was from this town, he was called Leonardo da Vinci, which simply means Leonardo from Vinci. He grew up running through the dusty roads and exploring the beautiful valleys of this quiet place. His family situation was complicated. His father was a successful lawyer from a respected family in the city. His mother, however, was a poor peasant girl. Because his parents were not married to each other, Leonardo was not allowed to follow in his father's footsteps. He could not become a lawyer or a doctor. The strict rules of society locked him out of traditional, respected careers. Because of this rule, he received almost no formal schooling. He did not sit in rich classrooms or listen to famous teachers. Other boys from good families were sent to study mathematics and history. Leonardo was left to himself. At the time, this seemed like a terrible disadvantage. But in reality, this lack of formal education became his greatest strength. His mind remained completely free. He proudly called himself an unlettered man. This meant he did not learn how to read Latin or ancient Greek. All the famous science books of the time were written in those old languages. Because he could not read the old books, he could not copy the old mistakes. He had to find the truth by himself. He could not rely on the words of dead men. Instead of books, nature became his ultimate teacher. The natural world was a library, and every plant was a page. He spent his days outside, looking at the shapes of rocks and the shadows on the grass. He watched how insects crawled and how the wind pushed the clouds. He learned to trust his own two eyes more than anything else in the entire world. Walking alone in the wild hills, he felt a deep connection to the earth. He would sit for hours just drawing the things he saw. He practiced making lines on paper until they perfectly matched the objects in front of him. During one of these long walks in the mountains, he experienced a moment that showed exactly who he was. It happened near a strange rock formation. He was hiking up a steep path when he suddenly stopped. Right in front of him, hidden behind some thick bushes, was a massive dark cave. The opening was huge and black. It looked like a giant mouth waiting in the side of the mountain. The young boy stood completely still. Two very different feelings fought inside his chest at that exact same moment. Looking into the heavy shadows, he felt a deep, natural fear. The dark cave was scary. He did not know what wild animals or dangerous drops might be hiding inside. Human instinct tells us to run away from the dark. It warns us to stay safe in the warm sunlight. His heart beat faster as he stared into the cold blackness of the mountain hole. But right beside that fear was a burning desire. He desperately wanted to know what was inside. Was there a hidden spring? Were there strange glowing rocks? His curiosity was pulling him forward, deeper into the unknown. This was the story of his entire life. The need to discover the truth was always stronger than the fear of the dark. He slowly stepped inside. That same curiosity soon pushed him out of his quiet village. As he grew into a teenager, his father noticed his amazing drawing skills. The father knew his son could not be a lawyer, but he could work with his hands. So, he packed up the boy's things and took him away from the hills. They traveled to one of the most exciting cities in the world. Arriving in Florence was a shock to the senses. The city was loud, busy, and full of life. It was completely different from the peaceful village of Vinci. Florence was the rich center of the new modern world. Merchants were selling colorful silk, bankers were counting gold coins, and artists were building giant cathedrals. The streets were crowded with people, trading, talking, and creating. This gritty, fast-paced city was exactly what the young artist needed. He was taken to the workshop of a famous master named Verrocchio. A workshop back then was not a quiet school. It was a loud, dirty factory of art. They made everything from small jewelry to giant bronze statues. It smelled like hot metal, wet clay, and fresh paint. Leonardo was ready to learn. He started at the very bottom. For a long time, he just swept the dusty floors and cleaned the dirty brushes. Then, his master taught him the secret recipes for making colors. He learned how to crush rare stones to make deep blue paint. He learned how to mix egg yolks and oil to make the colors stick to wood. He was a perfect student. Here, he discovered that true art is actually a science. To draw a person perfectly, you must understand how the body is built. To paint a realistic tree, you must know how it grows. Verrocchio taught his students to study the real world closely. Leonardo took this lesson further than anyone else ever had. He started measuring everything he saw with mathematical precision. Understanding light and shadow became his special skill. He noticed that shadows are never completely black. They have soft edges and hidden colors. He practiced painting objects so they looked completely three-dimensional. His painted apples looked like you could pick them up and eat them. His master quickly realized that this young boy from the country had a very rare and terrifying level of talent. The real test came a few years later. Verrocchio received a big order to paint a picture called The Baptism of Christ. It was normal for the master to paint the main parts and let his best students paint the background. Verrocchio asked young Leonardo to paint one small angel in the bottom corner of the wooden panel. It was a standard, simple job. Leonardo took his brushes and went to work on the angel. He did not use the traditional flat style of the time. He mixed his oil paints in a brand new way. He made the angel's hair look soft and real. He made the skin glow with a warm, natural light. He added tiny, perfect details to the clothes. The result was absolutely breathtaking. When Verrocchio saw the finished angel, he was completely shocked. He stood staring at the corner of the painting for a long time. The student's work was so much better than the master's work. The angel looked completely alive, while the rest of the painting looked stiff and old. The young boy had found a level of beauty that the older man could never reach. Legend says that Verrocchio was incredibly humbled by this moment. He saw the future of art in that single painted face. He slowly put down his wooden paint palette and his brushes. He declared that he would never paint again because a young boy had defeated him. Whether the legend is completely true or not, everyone in Florence now knew the name Leonardo. Soon after, he opened his own workshop. But as he grew older, his mind started moving too fast. Painting a single picture was no longer enough to keep him happy. He had thousands of questions bouncing around inside his head. He needed a way to catch his thoughts before they flew away. This need led to his most famous and important daily habit. He began carrying a small notebook tied to his belt. Everywhere he went, he had paper and a pen ready. If he saw an interesting face in the market, he drew it. If he watched a horse run, he sketched its legs. He started writing down absolutely everything. These daily pages became the most valuable record of a human mind in all of history. Over his lifetime, he filled thousands and thousands of pages. Today, we call them his notebooks. They are a wild, beautiful mess of ideas. You can find a beautiful drawing of a flower right next to a design for a deadly weapon. You can see a recipe for dinner written next to a complex mathematical formula. It is a complete map of his busy brain. He used these pages to ask simple but incredible questions. Things that normal adults ignore, he focused on deeply. He wrote down questions like, why is the sky blue? He wanted to know exactly how light travels through the air to create that color. He was not satisfied with simple answers. He wanted the pure scientific truth behind every everyday mystery. Another day, he would spend hours watching birds in flight. He filled dozens of pages drawing the exact shape of a bird's wing. He analyzed how the air pushed against the feathers. He dreamed of building a machine that would allow a human being to fly. Hundreds of years before airplanes were invented, Leonardo was already sketching wings made of wood and thick cloth. One of the most famous things about his notebooks is the handwriting itself. Leonardo was naturally left-handed. Back then, writing with ink using the left hand was difficult. If you moved your hand from left to right, you would smear the wet ink. To solve this messy problem, he developed a very strange and unique way of writing his daily notes. He wrote completely backwards. His letters were reversed, and his sentences moved from the right side of the page to the left. If you look at his notebooks normally, it looks like a secret, alien language. But if you hold the paper up to a mirror, the words suddenly become perfectly clear and easy to read. It was his own personal code. People have argued about this mirror writing for centuries. Some historians believe he was trying to hide his brilliant ideas from thieves and spies. They think he wanted to protect his military inventions. Others believe it was simply the fastest and cleanest way for a left-handed man to write with wet ink. Whatever the reason, it added to his deep atmosphere of mystery. But his amazing, racing mind also brought a terrible curse. He suffered from severe distraction. Because he was interested in absolutely everything, he found it very hard to focus on just one task. A rich banker would pay him to paint a portrait. He would start the painting, but then get distracted by studying the geometry of the human eye. The painting would wait. This happened again and again. He started many massive projects, but he finished very few of them. People in Florence started to lose patience with him. They said he was brilliant, but completely unreliable. He would leave beautiful paintings only half finished because he had moved on to studying water pumps or designing bridges. He needed a change of scenery and a new challenge. Leaving Florence behind, he packed his bags and moved to the powerful city of Milan. He knew he needed a strong, wealthy leader to support his wild ideas. He decided to write a letter to the Duke of Milan. This letter is one of the most confident job applications in history. He did not write about beautiful angels or soft oil paintings. Instead, He presented himself as a genius military engineer. In the letter, he promised he could build terrifying machines of war. He said he could design strong, lightweight bridges that an army could carry. He claimed he could drain water from rivers to destroy enemy castles. He promised to invent secret, covered wagons that were safe from enemy fire. He was inventing the armored tank. He listed many terrible weapons he could create for the Duke. He talked about giant catapults and rapid-fire guns. It was only at the very bottom of this long letter, in the final sentence, that he casually mentioned his art. He wrote, "Also, in painting and sculpture, I can do as well as any other man." The Duke was impressed and hired him. There is a strange, dark tension during these years in Milan. Leonardo was a man who deeply loved life. He bought caged birds at the market just to set them free. He was a vegetarian because he did not want to hurt animals. Yet, he spent his days drawing brutal war machines designed to cut down enemy soldiers. His mind was full of contrasts. Perhaps he just needed the Duke's money to survive and fund his science. He worked for the ruler of Milan for many years. During this time, the Duke asked him to build the greatest monument in the world. It was going to be a massive bronze statue of a horse. It was meant to be over 24 feet tall. Nothing like it had ever existed. For years, Leonardo studied horses. He measured their muscles and watched how they galloped. Finally, he built a full-size model out of heavy clay. It stood in a courtyard in Milan, huge and magnificent. People traveled from other cities just to see the giant clay horse. The next step was to heat tons of metal and pour it into a mold to make it permanent bronze. Tragedy struck before he could finish. War arrived at the gates of Milan. The Duke took all the expensive bronze metal meant for the horse and used it to make cannons instead. When the enemy soldiers entered the city, they found the giant clay horse. They used Leonardo's beautiful masterpiece for target practice. They shot arrows into it until it crumbled completely into the dirt. It was a crushing defeat. The great horse was gone forever. But the Duke still had another job for him. He asked Leonardo to paint a picture on the wall of a local dining hall for monks. The subject was going to be the final meal of Jesus and his followers. This project would become known to the world as the Last Supper. He approached this task like a scientist solving a psychological puzzle. He did not want to just paint 13 quiet men sitting at a long table. He wanted to capture the exact second of maximum shock. He chose the moment right after Jesus says that one of his friends will betray him. He wanted to freeze that explosion of human emotion on the plaster wall. The monks who lived there watched him work in a very strange way. Leonardo would arrive early in the morning and climb up the wooden ladders to the top of the wall. Sometimes, he would not pick up a single brush. He did not mix any wet paint. He just stood there. He looked at the empty space for many hours in complete silence. He was painting the picture inside his mind first. He wrote in his notebooks that the highest goal of an artist is to paint the motions of the mind. He meant that a face must show exactly what the soul is feeling. He searched the streets of Milan for ordinary people with interesting faces. He used bakers and soldiers as models for the holy men. When he finally painted, the results were incredible. You can see fear, anger, confusion, and love on the faces of the men. Their hands are waving in the air. The energy in the painting is alive. But once again, his need to experiment caused a massive problem. He did not use the traditional method for painting on walls, which is called fresco. True fresco requires painting very quickly on wet plaster. Leonardo hated working quickly. He wanted to paint slowly, making tiny changes over months. So, he invented a brand new mixture of oil and egg to use on the dry stone wall. It was a brilliant scientific idea in his mind. But in the real, damp room of the monks, it was a total disaster. Almost immediately after he finished the masterpiece, it began to fail. The new paint could not stick to the cold, wet wall. Within a few short years, the beautiful colors started flaking off and falling to the floor. The painting looked like it was crying. For centuries, people have tried to save it. Today, it is a faded shadow of what he actually created. As Milan fell to foreign armies, he was forced to pack his bags again. He returned to Florence much older, but with an even deeper curiosity. He was no longer just an artist or an engineer. He had become deeply obsessed with the hidden mechanics of human life. He wanted to know the ultimate secret. He wanted to know how a human being actually worked. To find the truth, he did something that was dangerous and shocking. In the cold, dark nights, he went into the lower rooms of the hospitals. With only a small candle for light, he cut open dead human bodies. He pulled back the skin to look at the hidden architecture inside. He was not trying to be frightening. He was searching for beautiful scientific truth. He discovered how muscles pull on bones like ropes. He figured out how the heart pumped blood like a powerful water machine. He made incredibly detailed drawings of the spine and the brain. No doctor in the world understood the human body as well as this painter did. He saw that the human body was nature's most perfect and complicated engineering project. Around this same time, a wealthy silk merchant asked him for a favor. The merchant wanted a simple portrait of his young wife. Her name was Lisa. Leonardo agreed to the job. He prepared a small piece of wood and started to paint. He probably thought it would be a quick, simple project to earn some money. He was completely wrong about that. The painting of Lisa soon became an absolute obsession. He poured everything he had learned about anatomy, light, and nature into this single, small picture. He used a special technique to blend the shadows perfectly around her eyes and mouth. There are no hard lines anywhere on her face. The colors melt into each other like smoke in the evening air. It stopped being a picture of a merchant's wife. It became a deep study of the earth and the human spirit. The twisting rivers in the background mirror the veins inside her body. The rocky mountains behind her reflect the ancient bones of the earth. He was painting his entire philosophy of the connected universe into one quiet, sitting woman. The most fascinating part, of course, was her expression. He understood exactly how the muscles of the face create emotions. He gave her a look that changes depending on how you look at it. If you stare at her eyes, she seems to be smiling. If you look at her mouth, the smile disappears. It is a brilliant, interactive illusion created by a master scientist. He never finished the portrait. At least, he never admitted it was finished. He refused to give the painting to the merchant who paid for it. He kept the Mona Lisa with him for the next 16 years. He carried that small piece of wood with him everywhere he traveled. He would add a tiny drop of fresh oil to it every few months. Time continued to pass, and his energy finally began to fade. The endless political wars of Italy made it hard to work. He was tired of moving from city to city, looking for rich men to pay for his science. Fortunately, a great honor arrived in his final years. The young King of France, who deeply respected his genius, sent him a royal invitation. The king offered him a beautiful brick house near a royal castle in France. He was given a generous salary. The best part was that he had no heavy duties. The king simply wanted the great master to live nearby so they could talk about philosophy and science. Leonardo packed his heavily filled notebooks, his favorite brushes, and the Mona Lisa for one last journey. He crossed the high, freezing mountains and settled into his new French home. For a few quiet years, he lived peacefully. He organized his thousands of pages of notes and sketches. He watched the river flow past his window. He talked with the king about building new canals and perfect cities. But his right arm became paralyzed, making it very difficult to draw. In the spring of 1519, his incredible journey came to an end. He lay in his bed, knowing his time was short. According to historical records, his final thoughts were incredibly harsh on himself. The man who invented the future felt a deep, crushing sense of regret. He looked back at all his unfinished projects and his thousands of messy, brilliant pages. He reportedly cried out that he had offended God and mankind. He believed his work had not reached the perfect quality it should have. He felt he had wasted too much time being distracted by simple curiosities. He died thinking he was a failure because he never built the flying machine. and he never finished his greatest plans. He was too hard on himself. Looking back across the centuries, we know the complete truth. He was not a failure in any way. His real masterpiece was not a painting of a woman or a mural on a dining hall wall. His true masterpiece was his beautiful, restless mind. He was the very first human being to clearly see that absolutely everything in our wide universe is deeply connected. He proved that art and science are not enemies. They are two different languages used to describe the exact same magical world. He taught us that the swirling water in a dark river moves perfectly like the curly hair on a person's head. He showed us that the thick branches of a winter tree look exactly like the pumping blood vessels in our own lungs. His life leaves us with a very powerful lesson. You do not need formal degrees or rich titles to understand the world. You simply need to open your eyes. You need to look at ordinary things with extraordinary attention. Do not accept simple answers. Ask why the sky is blue. Ask how the bird flies. The world is full of wonders waiting for you. Thank you for traveling back in time with us to explore the mind of the great master. His spirit lives on in every person who looks up at the stars and wonders how they work. Stay curious, keep exploring, and never stop asking questions. We will see you in the next story. Long ago, the world was a very traditional place. People lived simple lives and followed the old rules of the past. In 15th century Italy, men and women usually did the exact same jobs their parents did. They accepted the world exactly as it was. Few people asked big questions about nature or science. But in the middle of this quiet history, everything was about to change. A new kind of light was breaking through the darkness of the past. This change needed a special kind of person. It needed someone who did not just accept the normal rules. It required a man who looked at ordinary things and saw magic. This is the story of Leonardo da Vinci. He is famous as a painter, but his true genius was his deep, endless curiosity. Most people walk through a forest and only see trees. Leonardo was completely different. When he looked at a small bird in the sky, he did not just see an animal. He saw a perfect flying machine. When he looked at a simple flower, he saw a complex mathematical design. His eyes worked differently than anyone else's. He watched the world with intense, total focus. He was not satisfied with just one skill. In those days, a person was a builder, a soldier, or an artist. Leonardo wanted to be all of them. He had a strong desire to know absolutely everything about the universe. He wanted to understand how water moved in a river and how the stars traveled in the night sky. His mind was always hungry for new answers. We often call this period in history the Renaissance. It is a French word that means rebirth. But you can simply think of it as a time of waking up. Europe was waking up from a long, sleepy period. People started to read, explore, and invent again. And right at the center of this great awakening was the brilliant, restless mind of Leonardo da Vinci. Before we go deeper into his incredible mind, take a quick moment to tell us in the comments below, where are you listening from today? It is always amazing to see people from all over the world connecting through history. If you enjoy these deep stories, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us continue. Now, let us return to the beginning of Leonardo's journey. To understand the man, we must first look at the boy. His brilliant mind did not begin in a great university or a rich palace. It started in the quiet green hills of the Italian countryside. The early years of his life shaped everything he would later become. It was a humble beginning, far away from the busy cities and powerful kings he would eventually know. In the year 1452, a baby was born in a very small village. The name of the village was Vinci. It was surrounded by olive trees, rivers, and wild nature. Because he was from this town, he was called Leonardo da Vinci, which simply means Leonardo from Vinci. He grew up running through the dusty roads and exploring the beautiful valleys of this quiet place. His family situation was complicated. His father was a successful lawyer from a respected family in the city. His mother, however, was a poor peasant girl. Because his parents were not married to each other, Leonardo was not allowed to follow in his father's footsteps. He could not become a lawyer or a doctor. The strict rules of society locked him out of traditional, respected careers. Because of this rule, he received almost no formal schooling. He did not sit in rich classrooms or listen to famous teachers. Other boys from good families were sent to study mathematics and history. Leonardo was left to himself. At the time, this seemed like a terrible disadvantage. But in reality, this lack of formal education became his greatest strength. His mind remained completely free. He proudly called himself an unlettered man. This meant he did not learn how to read Latin or ancient Greek. All the famous science books of the time were written in those old languages. Because he could not read the old books, he could not copy the old mistakes. He had to find the truth by himself. He could not rely on the words of dead men.